My friend Aaron Silverman is not just an engineering manager at Datadog working on feature flags. He's also an instrument-rated private pilot, was on search and rescue teams in the mountains of western Colorado, but most importantly for today's conversation, has spent the last year giving talks at conferences and speaking with customers and meeting engineers all over the world to talk to them about feature flags and where they're at with adoption, blockers, and scaling the use of feature flags for safe deployments. So I wanted to sit down with Aaron to ask him, heading into 2026, what's the state of feature flagging? What are the interesting capabilities that are on the horizon, and where are we collectively now versus 5 or 10 years ago? That's all on today's episode of Outperform. All right, Aaron, so you've been busy building Datadog feature flags, but you've also been going and speaking at all these conferences and meeting people out in the field, talking with customers. So I'll start off very broad here. Like, what is the state of feature flagging as we're entering 2026?
Yeah, happy to give the state from my perspective. And it's interesting because I'm definitely in a bubble, having worked for an experimentation platform company, and I've worked for other experimentation-focused companies as well, and then followed those coworkers to other jobs of mine. So everywhere I've gone has always had experimentation in our blood. And then I go to these conferences and ask people, what are you doing for A/B tests? And the answer is, oh, nothing. Like we've thought about it, and my mind is blown. And what I've realized is there are a lot of companies out there that are super sophisticated with experimentation, and famously so, Airbnb, Netflix, LinkedIn, and on the cutting edge, driving great discussions. Then there's companies that are doing like a normal amount of experimentation. They're not leading the field, but they're using it as a tool, just like any other tool. And then there's a lot of companies not using it. And this reminds me a lot of other arcs in developing and shipping software that I've seen. So the analogy I've been giving lately is one of automated tests, or unit tests, you might call them. So if you rewind the clock 15 years ago, it was mostly the cool companies that were writing unit tests and had suites of automated tests to protect against errors being introduced by the code. And they would go to these conferences and talk about how these tests caught bugs before they hit production, and then most of the other attendees were just deploying code and clicking around in production, and they were sitting there wowed and jealous. And then if you fast forward further in time, then it was kind of like 50-50. Like, okay, you had a bunch of companies using unit tests now. It's more common practice, but there's still a lot of people not doing it. And the reason it gained ground is because as engineers left places that had automated tests and went to places that didn't, they felt naked, they felt unprepared, and helped spread it. And now today, if you show up at a software company, they have no automated tests, they're straight up being reckless. Like they're just they should be given a citation, a yellow card, a red card for their development process. And then similar, although we're not as far along the court, with observability. So working at Datadog, I see observability. I ask a lot of people, what do you use for observability? And I get a lot more answers this time. A lot of times, Datadog or some other products, but there's still some companies out there that are not using anything, or they're just using what's built into their cloud hosting provider, and it's not top of mind. But for the most part, if you're not doing any kind of observability, that's seen as reckless. And in fact, it's part of due diligence checks when companies are acquired. It's part of security reviews of SOC 2 compliance is what you're alerting and monitoring. Whereas 10 years ago, it was just kind of the more advanced companies doing observability. And so feature flags is in the same spot, but just like later on. Is right now, we have all these companies who are doing amazing things with experimentation we talked about. And then when someone works for one of those companies and they go somewhere else and like, oh, what do you use for A/B tests? Oh, we don't really do A/B tests. They're like, wow, like that's crazy. Like, what are you doing? That's like flying blind. But for people who've never been in that environment, who've never validated a hypothesis by running an experiment, who've never de-risked a production deploy by putting it behind a flag, they don't know what they're missing. And so we're in that space of basically an increasing amount of engineers and product leaders and data scientists that think it's downright reckless and idiotic not to be A/B testing or using feature flags, and those who just haven't really thought about it.
And so you're not quite getting in on the ground floor if you start doing it now, but you're still somewhat of an early adopter. Is where you think we are in the arc.
Yes. So right now, no one's going to call you reckless, except for me, for not doing A/B tests. But they would for automated tests and observability. And I think if you fast forward 5-10 years, it's going to be like automated tests. Like, hey, what do you guys do for A/B tests? Nothing. What? Like,
Yeah.
how can you be head of product? How can you be head of engineering? Like, I'm embarrassed for you that you're not A/B testing. And I think that is what the state will be in 5 or 10 years. And what surprises me is that we're not there today.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that. I tell a very similar story about sort of like what feels like it's been a slow proliferation of experimentation, and maybe it's unsurprising that we tell such similar stories because we've worked together for the last whatever it is, 2 or 3 years now. So glad to see there's alignment. But do you ever talk to people who are not using feature flags ubiquitously today, and it's not just a lack of awareness? Like, are there still technical blockers to be solved for out there, or are there cultural challenges on engineering teams where like there are people interested in using flags, but there's some gap between intent and adoption?
Yeah, I've talked to most folks are not under a rock. They know A/B tests exist. They've read Lean Startup. They know feature flags exist. And the main reason they're not using them is cultural. It's habit and it's inertia. And it's the same with unit tests. When I was trying to get people to write automated tests 15 years ago, they're like, "Oh, this sounds like a lot of extra work for something that's not adding value to the customer. This is just extra code, extra effort. Like, why would I do this when I could be shipping something that is gonna sell more?" And I had to convince them, no, this will save time. And I had to highlight the wins. Every time an automated test caught something before prod, I would parade it around the company. Be like, look, and then more engineers would see that and say, okay, that's what I want. Like, I don't want to be the person that crashes production, and I see automated tests as a tool to get me there. And the same with these engineers who are not using flags and who are not doing any experiments, is if they had peers who were getting these great wins, or these peers who were averting disaster, and it was more front and center, I think that would be enough to overcome their inertia and break their habits. But for now, it's really easy to talk yourself out of not bothering to run A/B tests, because you can do all right without running A/B tests. Like, running A/B tests is what takes you from good to great. It's not what's gonna take you from awful to good. Well, it may. I mean, if you find the right learning, but in general, you could not be running A/B tests and not be using feature flags and be doing like fine. It's really the potential that's being left on the table by not using these tools, and unless you feel that pain, that opportunity cost, you're not going to be motivated. And so it is on the folks who show up from one company to another and then realize, like, whoa, we're flying blind. And we talk to these companies at EPO. We've talked to people who moved from one company to another, and they called us, and we come in and we realize, oh, the problem here is just getting management buy-in.
Sure.
And so people, I think they just don't know what they're missing. And as that becomes clearer and clearer, then that will overcome their old habits, and they'll build new ones.
Yeah. This is an odd question maybe, but you mentioned just sort of motivation for individual engineers to use flags. I think of you very highly, not just as someone who's good at writing code, but as an engineering manager too. I'm curious, like, Do you think the right incentives are in place in a lot of engineering organizations to encourage people to use flags? Or do you think, there's something we could evolve about the way engineering efforts are goaled or measured inside organizations that would encourage like experimentation as a behavior?
Yeah. The incentives are not perfectly aligned right now. As an engineer, I'm trying to get the feature out. I'm developing it locally, so I want it working on my machine. I want it in the QA, and I wanted to get it out to customers as fast as possible. And so if I'm introducing feature flags, depending on the system I'm using, it could be kind of a pain to like set that up, and then I have to do the mental calculus of, all right, is this change flag worthy or not? And be nervous, like I was it silly of me to put this behind a feature flag, or like I didn't put this behind a feature flag because it was a quick bug fix, but maybe I should have. And then I roll it out, and then now like I have this thing I have to babysit. It's like a Tamagotchi for those of you old enough to remember. I have to like increase the exposure and adjust my targeting rules, set it to the QA team first, and then maybe expose it to a small group of people as a canary rollout, and then into a 50-50 test, and then I have to monitor this test. So at this point now I'm working on my next feature, and I have to come back to that 50-50 test and look at it. And so as an engineer, I just want to get stuff done. And so the incentives are not totally aligned, and I think the solution is reducing friction. So one of the best things to happen with unit tests is companies like GitHub came out with GitHub Actions. Companies like CircleCI got invented. They just automatically ran the unit tests when I opened a pull request or when I merged. And all of a sudden I stopped thinking about it. Like I didn't have to run them or whatever. I just got emailed if something broke, and usually that was saving my butt. And so I think the same thing. I think we're on the same trajectory with experimentation. Is imagine I code up a change, and it just automatically gets flagged, automatically starts getting canary deployed, and then, oh shoot, it tanked sales by mistake, automatically rolled back. That's awesome. If I'm an engineer and I wake up to an email that says, hey, we caught that your feature had a bug that was caught and then rolled back, I'm like, all right, it's worth it to put flags in now. Like that's great. If it runs a 50-50 test, if I don't have to babysit that, if it's just progressively increasing, and then I get emailed the results, and either it's rolled out or it's not, and we iterate, but either way it like turns the flag off and cleans it up from the code and does all this for me, like awesome.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we want the same thing. Engineers want to improve the experience for their customers, and engineers don't want to horribly break things in their attempts to improve the experience for their customers. And feature flags and experimentation is a tool for both of those things. And now it's just a matter of reducing the friction so that like there's no real downside in the engineer's mind or mental calculus to using that tool. That they would be reckless and idiotic if they were not using them.
You said something that brought up a question in my mind, and this is like an honest question, and I don't think I'm trying to lead to any particular answer here or another, but you mentioned this sort of choice point behind or around having to decide if the code you're deploying needs a feature flag or not. In your perfect world, are there instances where you shouldn't be using feature flags, or should every single deployment be flagged?
In the perfect world, every deployment is flagged and progressively rolled out, but with zero effort from me. And there are some companies that are close to this. Netflix has like a great paper on how close they've gotten. But if you get 100 engineers in a room, I'm sure at least 70 will have the story of like the one line code change that broke production. And I did one myself. I had a one line PR. It dropped an index that I didn't think was being used in the database. But lo and behold, we had an index hint in another query somewhere. And I just like merged the PR without thinking, like that's one line. It's dropping an index. Index is like, they're just behind the scenes. It's not gonna do anything. And then the app failed to boot and deployments were broken and the site went down. And it was from one like very innocuous looking line. Going back to that mental calculus is like engineers are pretty good at guessing how risky a code change is, but we're not perfect. And so because of that, if you are seeking perfection, which we can't achieve, but we might as well seek it, you would just canary everything, even if it's just for a few minutes or a few
Yep.
percentage points.
Yep. I mean, it mirrors growth in product experiments exactly, right? It's like the closer the cost of the experiment gets to zero, the more we should just do as many tests as possible, as many ideas as possible, regardless of what our guess is, because that cost is so close to zero.
Yeah, and
Um,
humanity has faced similar conundrums. Like I think when the polio vaccine came out, people were very eager to just start giving everyone this medicine, but they're like, no, 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 let's like test it, and so it delayed, and more people died, but it gave them confidence in the vaccine, and it's it's good because I'm sure for every one of those cases, every now and then there's like something that seems promising that's actually not promising. And there's lots of studies of that. So
yep. Yep.
yeah, software is no different. Is that as optimistic as we can be? It's if you yeah if the cost is zero, like why not do it? It's all
So,
upside.
speaking of being unduly optimistic, perhaps, if I am, an engineering manager at a company that does not use feature flags today, and I want to get started, I could probably just build my own feature flagging tool because they're kind of just like Boolean or like if then statements, right? Like what could go wrong?
Yeah. Feature flags are just booleans as a service, just very expensive booleans as a service. Like why not? Just this is the exact trap I've fallen into at past companies.
Okay, yeah. Tell us more here. Give us the war story.
Yeah. So you read the books, you see enough conference talks, you hear people like me tell you you're reckless if you don't use feature flags. So you're like, you know what? That you're right. Start using feature flags, decouple deployments from like releasing and all the benefits that come with flags, and this can't be that hard. And so you just create. A lot of times these companies have a database already, like MySQL or something else, and then so okay, we'll just enter it in there. We'll just put it in there, like new feature on or off, Boolean column. We'll just check that when we load the page. It's great, and it will work for like the first few flags, and then things get complex very quickly. So even just a Boolean flag is not a Boolean flag. If you have like what happens if someone deletes that row or turns it off? Do you just want your program to crash, or is there a default that it should fall back to? And then is that default true or false? So now Booleans actually have more than two possible outcomes. And okay, so like so even that is more complicated. And then you want to A/B test this Boolean flag, simple Boolean flag, like I'll turn off for half the people. Well, how are you gonna do that? And so in the super early days, we literally just generated a random number for the person, and then if it was like the first half, they got variation A, second half variation B, and life was good. But then we're like, actually, we need to like track who got assigned what, so we can figure out if this helps. And then we started saving that to the database, and then then it's a whole mess. Then it started blowing up the database, and reading it caused all sorts of issues. Then we came up with like deterministic hashing ideas, and now like assignments should be sent to warehouses, but now you're talking about like data pipelines. And then what happens if someone is assigned one value and then like later another? Does that taint the experiments? Now you need to remove that, and then you're actually doing the math, and people are running the math by hand. So then we like have inconsistent results, and then we try to like formalize that in a dashboard, and that was fine, but now we're just like reinventing all this. It just blows up. It just blows up.
Yeah.
And we were not in that business, and we had at one point like 4 full-time engineers just working on this stuff. It was not our core competency. So I think just like car companies don't. It's like tires. Like why don't car companies make their own tires? Like tires, it's super simple, right? It's a circle of rubber, or that's what you're tempted to say. But no, tires are super complex, and they have like walls and tread, and it's one of the most important things, because if the tire goes, doesn't matter how good your car is going off the road. And I think car companies rightfully were like, you know what, we're gonna let like tire companies specialize on tires, and just we're gonna focus on cars, and then we're gonna add the tires to our cars, and life will be good. And that's kind of what you need to do in the flag and experimentation world is just have someone else deal with it, because it always sounds simple, and then you try to do like a little bit more and a little bit more, and then there's edge cases and error scenarios and interpreting the data, and it just spirals out of control quickly.
Yeah. So do not build your own feature flagging tool is the advice here. My plan to one shot my own flagging platform in Claude Code sounds like I'm not going to have a great time.
Yeah. Well, the problem is you'll have a great time for like the first couple weeks.
Sure.
Like it won't be immediate. The pain is not immediate. It sneaks up on you.
So I guess to kind of put a bow on things as we look towards the year ahead, or even just looking back over the last year or so, like what are the capabilities that you and your team are bringing to feature flagging that you're most excited about? Like things that have been frustrations you've heard from customers, from fellow engineers that we're solving for that are particularly interesting to you.
Yeah. There's a couple of things that are particularly interested to me, and they're not related to each other. So I'll just hit you with them, and you can tell me when to stop. The first and most obvious thing about feature flags that's interesting to me right now is this collision course with observability tooling. Is Observability has been great, and whenever something goes wrong, people log into their observability tool and look at the errors and stuff, and then the first question they ask themselves is what changed? What changed? Because usually something going wrong is the result of a change. And so the first culprit you look for is code deploys. And observability tools have done all this effort to integrate with your CI/CD systems and put these like vertical lines on your graphs of like, this is when the code deployed, and you can like look at the graph and see that the errors just jump after this line, and you're like, aha, I found it. And now people are decoupling, releasing from deployments, which is a best practice in many ways, but it creates this blind spot, this invisibility to your observability tooling. Is you don't have a vertical line on your graph that says, this flag changed right here. Unless you've like implemented some of these custom feature flag integrations or rolled your own. It's possible to bring flag changing into tooling via like custom metric system, but most companies don't bother. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of hassle. And just having this be more seamlessly integrated, I think is going to be very powerful. And you combine that with AI SREs that are analyzing everything, and now it's even more valuable to have feature flags in the same system as the rest of your stuff, so that when your database CPU spikes, not only can a human see, this happened after this flag flipped, but AI agent can see that and recommend action and remediation like much quicker than a human could.
Exciting.
So that's one thing I think. Yeah, I think it's very exciting. Totally on the other side of things that excite me and this goes back to like feature flags sounding simple, but they're not simple. Is expanding flags to think about the future at the time of the flag. And this might not make sense, but let's say you have a new feature and you want to try it out, so you default it to off, and then you gradually roll it out 50%. Okay, and then a week later, you're like, this is a good feature, I'm gonna turn it on. So you turn it on, and then eventually some engineer goes and cleans up the code, and so removes that flag, and now it's just on permanently. But until they do that, its default is off, and it's only on because it's getting the signal from the feature flagging service that it's on. And so that is fine in most situations, but not mobile apps. Is if you have an older mobile app that hasn't updated the code, like you basically need to receive that feature flag value forever. And if you're like me, some mobile apps you don't update as often as you should, and there's a lot of mobile apps out there, and so this actually is a pretty big problem. And so when you're thinking about the future, if you can build that into the flag in the present, that will help address some of these issues. So for example, let's say I, in my code, say, here's my new feature. Its default is off, but please fetch the value from my feature flag service. But on this date, 4 months from now, just assume that we rolled it out, and now the default is now true. And let's say that's in my code. And so now fast forward 4 months, the system can detect that, and if it hasn't been cleaned up by an engineer, it can hey, here's a stale flag. Like, go ahead and clean it up. We expected this flag to hit end of life at this date, because that was literally written in the code by the engineer. Or even just creates, LM just creates a PR, cleans up the flag. And then all these mobile apps that might not have gotten updated code will just switch from defaulting to off to defaulting to true. And we can safely remove that flag from being distributed and just archive it. There's some pretty novel and cutting edge stuff happening about baking in future behavior to in the present flag requests when it comes to managing stale flags and outdated deployments.
Yeah, all about decreasing the cost post deployment of having that flag in the first place. You're removing that future friction.
It's all about reducing friction. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really exciting stuff. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for giving us your very well-informed perspective on what feature flagging is working on and where we think things are going over the next, 6, 12 months, 3 years, 5 years, who knows? But
I look forward to revisiting this video in 5 years, and then when I find a company that's still not using flags for whatever reason, being like, hey, past Aaron warned you, but I'm going to call you reckless and idiotic right now, because that's kind of that's what you're doing if that's how you're developing software, especially in this future with flying cars or whatever else we have going on in 5 years. So
this episode will have been incredibly prescient, indeed.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks again, Aaron.
All right. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks so much to Aaron for joining and for the conversation on feature flags and where we're all going over the next year and further out. For more on experimentation and feature flagging, keep it locked here to Outperform and the Datadog Community YouTube channel. I'm Ryan Lucht, and until next time, keep experimenting.